2020 Jeep Gladiator Mojave. Now, Mark and I have already done quite a few videos on the Wrangler and Gladiator respectively. And because they share basically the identical cabin, we're going to streamline this process a little bit. We're going to give you a crash course on the Gladiator and talk about some of the specific changes the Mohave trim level has made to this truck. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Wrangler and the Gladiator have a near identical cabin. In fact, from the driver's seats forward, it is the same cabin you would find in a JL Wrangler. And that's honestly not a bad thing. In fact, I think the Wrangler cabin is one of the best FCA makes. From the design language, material choice, the excellent use of both physical and touch controls, it's a very pleasing and usable cabin. But before I talk about the practicality, I want to talk about some of the changes the Mohave trim level makes to this truck. Now, the interior changes made by the Mohave trim level are pretty subtle, minus for, of course, the giant Mohave embroidered seats. These seats are in fact different than what you'd find in a regular Gladiator. They are slightly more aggressive, they're leather, and they have orange contrast stitching. In fact, you have burnt orange contrast stitching throughout the cabin. You have a slightly different steering wheel. You have the Off-Road Plus button exclusive to the Mohave, and we'll talk about what that does in the shop segment, and now a front-facing trail camera, an option originally exclusive to the Rubicon. So with that said, let's hop in the back and talk about the practicality. When it comes to the practicality side of the equation, that's where this truck really excels. You have great front seats. The back seat occupants have a reasonable amount of space, more in line with what you'd find in a full-size truck than a half or mid-sized truck that the Gladiator is. You have great cargo solutions throughout. You have a lockable front glove box. Your armrest is huge. These door nets are big, in fact big enough to fit a full-size water bottle. And underneath the rear seats, which are foldable, you have basically a cargo box that you can fit like a fishing pole in or various other knickknacks. You also have a 5-foot bed with great cargo tie downs. Now, my negatives are this. In fact, they all stem from the fact that this vehicle has an inherent design compromise. Because you can take the doors off, the roof off, and fold the front windshield, it's not a particularly well-sealed cabin. So in the wintertime, it's a little bit drafty. You have a lot more ambient noise than you're expecting, even with this hard top with the noise insulation panels, and because of that, the audio system also suffers. No one is buying a Jeep for a home theater experience. I totally accept that, but it's worth bringing up. So with that, let's head to the shop.
We are underneath the 1927 Jeep Gladiator. Yes, and we've been under this several times. We've looked at almost every single trim level, and now they've added the Mohave trim. What is it?
So before I get into what changes they made for the Mohave, let's do a crash course for our viewers on the Gladiator. So essentially you have a front end of a Wrangler. Yes, it's been modified and beefed up for truck duties, but for all intents and purposes, the transmission, the engine, a lot of the suspension stuff is all Wrangler. Okay. In the rear, you have a hybrid Ram truck setup mixed with some Jeep parts and a lot of other fun stuff in the back come from a Ram 1500. They did that for its increased towing capacity, its bed, all of its truck duties. And then you have a interesting hybrid frame between a Wrangler and a regular Ram. It's more beefed up again because it's a Gladiator. What they've done, however, with the Mohave trim is they had 5 test categories or criteria they wanted to exceed in. And unlike in a Rubicon, which is meant to do rock crawling, this is meant to blast through a sand dune, jump the curb at an Arby's drive-through.
Or go over railroad tracks flat out.
Yeah, pretty much.
So it's more about suspension travel here than complete articulation of each.
And ride control.
Okay, all right.
So you'll notice these massive, when I mean massive, they are enormous.
Yeah, these aluminum-bodied Fox body shocks have remote canisters, which has a oil feed line that runs the canisters to a location under the bumper, under the skid plate that's mounted there. So this gives you, well, when you want more suspension articulation and compression, you need oil flow and capacity. Some of it has to do with foaming and all the other things that happen to oil when you heat it up. So this prevents that, and it gives you that ability to drop this thing off a 3-story building, right? So the front is that way, but the back are not remote reservoirs. They're piggyback canisters on the body of the shock.
Yes.
So the front it's more critical for this with steering and all that.
And you also have their first implementation of a hydraulic bump stop. It basically acts as a secondary shock.
And that's exactly what it looks like when you look at the bump stop on here. It just looks like a flabby piece of rubber, but it really is a shock absorber within a shock absorber. And again, it's about compression and rebound. If you have a huge event like hitting a railroad track flat out, and that shock compresses all the way, it needs to hit that bump stop, but you can't just have it blasted either. So it also dampens that blow of that type of impact.
And the byproduct of this, other than being able to blast railroad tracks, is that the truck rides way better than you'd find in a regular Rubicon or regular Gladiator.
Which we'll talk about a bit during the drive. So there's no skid plates here, and that was by design. What else have they done here in terms of like transmission or differential?
So there is a command track unit, unlike the rock tracker. Forgive me, I can't exactly remember what it's called in the Rubicon. It's a two-way transfer case, and they've re-geared it for high-speed off-roading. They've also strengthened the frame dramatically compared to the regular Gladiator for when I'm not saying you should jump the truck, but if you do jump the truck, hopefully it doesn't bend like the Raptors do.
The original Raptors.
The original Raptors. Okay. Insert a video of it bending right now. The other thing to bring up is the Off-Road Plus feature. So this is the first time they've allowed you to go into four-wheel drive high, lock the rear end, turn off traction control, and allow you to slide it around in a dirt setting, which is what you want. You want to be able to rotate a truck off-road in a controlled manner.
Makes sense. So there's no front locker, it's only rear.
Only rear, and you do not get the basically adjustable locking sway bars in the front.
Or the disconnecting
that you get in the Gladiator Rubicon.
Okay. So this is a very specific setup for a small subset of buyers that want it, but we're going to talk about in the drive why you might even consider this over a Rubicon. So let's take it out on the road.
All right.
Oh. God, is that induction noise? Is this a V6?
Yes, a real, honest-to-God, naturally aspirated V6, paired to either this superb 8-speed automatic or a manual.
How can I even deal with this without fake engine noise?
I don't know. You can handle it.
There's no pops and farts coming from the exhaust that are synthetic? I mean, how can I really be connected to a machine?
I don't know, Mark, other than with the fact that you can take off all the doors and the roof and the windshield.
Oof. So that is a good lead in to what the Mojave or the Gladiator is. This is a truck, of course, but it's got the Jeep Wrangler attitude. So it becomes completely basically unique in its segment. There's nothing else like this with the price tag that it carries. And let's talk about that for a second. How much is it?
So this starts at about $43,000, which is in line with what you'd get from like a Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro. And obviously, once you start tacking on options, you can balloon it to almost 60 grand.
Holy crap.
Don't do that. But, at its base price, you get a really capable truck. And with what they've done, as I talked about in the shop earlier, with the suspension tuning, is extremely impressive. Because this is focused on higher speed, basically dune running, the ride quality, basically what you'll actually be caring about is your day-to-day ride quality is exponentially better.
Okay, so we've already covered the Gladiator and the Wrangler. Let's talk about how this is different from those on the road. The updated suspension. On roads like this and roads in our area, they're bad, just to put it easy like that.
Yeah, the Romans had better roads than us. Yeah, it's horrendous.
So you still feel like the truckishness in the steering. You can't avoid all that. That's what this is about. But it's taken off all the rough edges. You don't feel like somebody's like shaking you every time you hit a bump. All of that is gone. So this rides better on the street. When you take it on just dips, potholes, all that, you essentially feel nothing.
You can blast basically railroad tracks at highway speeds.
Flat out.
Yeah, and it's fine.
Right. And that's why you would want this. If you're in an area where you can appreciate what they've done here, I would almost take this over the regular Gladiator for suburban running, even though it's wasted largely like a sports car would be. But it rides way better. What other differences have you noticed?
The body control. So when you hit a bump, and again, this talks about ride quality a little bit, when you hit a bump in this, yes, you still feel like you're sailing, essentially. This is a huge truck, but it feels way less cumbersome than the Rubicon does. And if you're not rock crawling, this is the trim to get.
Okay. So the negatives are, as much as the ride quality is better, as soon as you take the roof panels off and you put the windows down and well, we didn't take the doors off, but it is like a tornado inside. After about 45 miles an hour, it feels like you're doing 150.
Every day in a Jeep is a wind advisory, Mark.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best way to put it. And it does get tiring if you're going to use this every day. I don't see you buying this and using it every day unless you're really in the climate for it. I've really enjoyed driving it because, again, this feels special. It doesn't feel like every single other copycat thing out there.
Yeah, I mean, we complain that everything feels the same. This doesn't. This is its own thing, and that's what Jeep does well, is character, and it makes a memorable product. Objectively, are there better products out there? You could argue the Raptor is more capable, or the Tacoma is more reliable, but to me, this is a more memorable product. You get this real open-top experience that's unique only to this, and it's funny. It's stupid in the same way of like a Tonka truck is.
Right. It's very whimsical, and it connects with this, and that's what's so lacking in the driving experience.
You know, you make a lot of compromises, but when you finally get to driving roads like this, I mean, it soaks up the bumps well. It's very, very capable. I mean, what else could you ask for?
I mean, I think we can kind of cover the other stuff in the final thoughts, but as a whole, I think mechanically, what they've done here with suspension, it is definitely compromised, but it's compromised in a way that makes you feel like this is a unique purchase, and I love it for that.
I do. I have a huge affinity for the Jeep brand, and particularly what they've done with the Gladiator. So with that said, Mark, let's head to the final thoughts.
All right. Final thoughts on the Jeep Gladiator Mojave. This trim level adds something unique compared to the Rubicon. You add high-end dampers like the Fox shocks, and this thing rides like a dream over every pavement surface. It still maintains that old-timey feeling, the truckishness, but smooths out all the rough edges. As a street cruiser, it's great. As a highway machine, like most Jeeps, it gets a little dicey, but you expect that from this. It's not trying to be what everybody else is doing. It doesn't have the cardboardness of like a Tacoma or a Raptor. A Raptor has this like, oh, I'm tough. This doesn't. It's whimsical. It's enjoyable. And of course, it's not for everyone. It's not trying to be for everyone. It has a ton of deficiencies, but that's okay because we need things like this that just stand out from the crowd. Now, think about it, drive it compared to other trucks, and see if you can utilize some of its core functions: towing, hauling, the bed, and great interior space. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.